You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Your Honor, I move to disqualify Ms. Vito as an expert witness.
Can you answer the question?
No, it is a trick question.
Why is it a trick question?
Watch this.
You're out of order! You're out of order! The whole trial is out of order!
Hello, and welcome to All Things Judicial, a podcast of the North Carolina Judicial Branch. I'm Roger Winstead with the Judicial Branch Communications Office. It's awards season in Hollywood, and the 95th Academy Awards were just held on Sunday, March 12th. What do golden statues and thank you speeches have to do with the All Things Judicial podcast, you may ask? Over the years, film plots have involved courtrooms, judges, attorneys, and at their very heart, justice. In this episode, we're joined in our studio by Judge Lucy Inman and her husband, Billy Warden, who will share their insights on how Hollywood portrays judicial matters in the court. Before we start, can you both please tell us a little bit about your qualifications that you each bring to today's topic, Hollywood justice?
Thank you so much for having us, Roger. We really appreciate being here together. Before I served as a judge on the North Carolina Court of Appeals, I served as a Superior Court judge. That's the trial courts where many stories that we see unfold in Hollywood take place. And before I served as a Superior Court judge, I was a lawyer myself, appearing in court. And before I went to law school, I was a newspaper reporter covering courts. And I think that's maybe when I met you, Roger, back in the legacy journalism days of the print newspaper. But covering courts really inspired me to go to law school because I saw that the courts are where people meet their government every day and where their government affects them. And it's all about justice. I'm a huge fan of films. I fell in love with a newspaper reporter who was going to film school, followed him to Los Angeles, and then actually had a high-profile trial myself that was covered in the press. But for me, the best time for my non-lawyer husband and me to bond is about great movies that have a little bit to do with my profession.
Yeah, and Lucy didn't mention, she was on court TV nonstop while she was representing Carol O'Connor in that case. So she's no stranger to being on camera. And I'm Billy Warden. I'm the lucky guy married to Lucy Inman, and I'm here today because I'm totally guilty. I mean, I'm guilty of being a movie junkie and guilty of loving watching movies with Lucy because of her commentary, and we love the legal movies because she can always clue me in as to how off base they are, and nonetheless, still quite entertaining. So, as Lucy mentioned, I was a newspaper reporter, headed out to L.A., went to film school, wrote screenplays, one of which was optioned by Larry Terman, the producer of The Graduate, and Warren Zide, the producer of American Pie, an odd couple, if there ever was one. I then became an executive producer at E! Entertainment Networks, where I worked closely with Joan Rivers, prosecuting all of the red carpet fashion debacles, and currently still am working on scripts in my spare time when I'm not running my marketing company. I have a magazine story that was optioned by Atlas Entertainment, the makers of American Hustle and the Wonder Woman movies, and they're terrific, and they're out there working that right now. And just my last little item here, if any lawyers out there have a great story that they want to bring to the screen, I'm always in the market for those kind of epic adventures.
Sounds great. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And with that, action.
Well done. Well, let me set the scene here first. It's about 7 o'clock in the evening in the Warden Inman den. I'm in an easy chair designed to help my aching back. Lucy's on the couch. Our fading black lab is in his bed. and we turn to Turner Classic Movies or HBO, and there's almost always a courtroom thriller on. And the plot starts to play out, and I'm like, how could that be? Could a lawyer really do that? Is that how evidence works? And Lucy's right there to always say, no, that could never happen. But be quiet. You're going to miss a point in this. So that's how we watch these things and critique these things. And Lucy, when we started talking about what movies that we wanted to get into, you were frighteningly, for me, really into Adam's Rib, which is one of the many movies that you like where the husband ends up shot. Go ahead. What's it about?
Well, the husband who's shot at the beginning of the film is the murder victim. But the husband who's really the star of the film, of course, is Spencer Tracy. And he doesn't realize that his wife, Katharine Hepburn, who is a lawyer in private practice, he's a prosecutor, she will be representing the defendant in this case. And what I love about Adam's Rib is that you see, and I will just say generally about courtroom films, it's usually not about civil procedure or criminal procedure or the nooks and crannies of how courts work. It's a bigger story. And that's a story about a woman's point of view, the point of view of the woman who's the defendant, and Katharine Hepburn being a woman representing her. It gets into her relationship with Spencer Tracy and women's roles in society. So that's why I love that one.
My big concern there is the woman who shot her husband convicted in the end? Or does she get off?
You know, it's been so long since I watched that film.
You'll have to watch the movie.
I have to admit.
You have to watch the movie, folks.
I'm fuzzy on that, and yes, you'll have to watch it.
Have to watch it. Well, Lucy got into the big picture, and we were talking the other day about why are these movies so popular? Like A Few Good Men cost about $40 million to make. It made $240 million. I mean, that's a lot of bank. Why? So that explains why Hollywood likes them, because they make money and they're cheap to produce. Essentially, it's a couple of rooms. There's a courtroom and maybe a couple of rooms where they get produced. But why does the public respond that way? And we were saying that it's because the law itself at the center of the film becomes the action set. The law is so full of twists and turns, evidence rules and surprises in the courtroom and loopholes that it becomes the legal system, our Byzantine and wonderful legal system, becomes the action set piece that is as enthralling as anything that Bruce Willis ends up doing in Die Hard, all of the actual thrills and spills.
And you don't have to pay for the pyrotechnics, you don't have to pay for the sets. And, really, I think it's partly what hooked me on courts when I was a reporter. It is, a front row seat to humanity. It's a structure. The story is told in a chronological form. And believe me, if courtroom movies really focused on courts and real time, I don't think people will be getting to the end of them. All the breaks that have to be taken, all of the mundane details that have to be worked out that are very, very fundamental and important. We just get to see the high spots.
Well, one movie, though, that was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress that does get into a lot of the nitty-gritty is My Cousin Vinny.
Oh, yes, it does.
Where you have Joe Pesci, some reason goes into the Deep South. Of course, he's playing some roughneck from New York City, gets into the Deep South to defend his nephew on a murder charge. And that movie is so entertaining because it plays out with, it's a fish out of water story, Pesci, the New Yorker, and being in this Deep South courtroom. But a lot of the twists are about rules of decorum and evidentiary rules, yeah?
They are. And as a matter of fact, Marissa Tomei, did she win the Oscar for that? She won the Oscar for that. That scene, there's a scene in the movie where Marissa Tomei, who's her character comes from a family of mechanics. And whatever other evidence is in this trial, it comes down to tire tracks of the car that left the scene where someone was killed. And surprisingly, she knows cars going back every year and tires going back every year like nobody's business. Well, when she explains how she's on cross-examination, how do you know this? And she has these answers. Her answers are so precise, but they're also so real. They're rooted in her experience. That courtroom scene is used to train lawyers and judges about the foundation that has to be laid for admission of expert testimony. And I think the other reason that movie's so successful is that you're giving an entertaining portrayal for the audience of how the courts work. It's hilarious to hear her describe those cars.
What's another movie that the lawyers and judges and things embrace as having some real instructional value? Like you're talking about, My Cousin Vinny does rely on some actual rules. Like, what about like To Kill a Mockingbird? Is that one that rings pretty true, or is that just far out in how it plays out in the courtroom?
I think that rings pretty true. And in To Kill a Mockingbird, the lawyers are professionals. You don't have any lawyers in To Kill a Mockingbird do what lawyers do in, say, The Godfather. Okay? The lawyers are following the rules. And Gregory Peck is questioning his client on redirect after I believe after cross-examination, or actually maybe on rebuttal. And anyway, there's been testimony that his client severely beat and raped a woman, and he used his right hand to dominate her. And the woman testifies to this, and her father testifies to this. And Gregory Peck calls his client to testify and asks him to put his left hand, I believe, behind his back and tosses something to his right hand to catch.
Ooh.
He can't catch it.
Yeah.
Because you know why?
Why?
His right hand is deformed.
Aha.
His right arm is weak.
Uh-huh.
It's impossible for this man to have done what the witnesses said he did.
And this is Gregory Peck saying, burn, boom.
No, he doesn't.
I rest my case.
He doesn't. It's enough that you see it, the audience sees it, and you get it.
Yeah, yeah. That is a great scene.
Then, of course, we must remind listeners, if you haven't seen that film or read that book, despite that evidence, Tom is convicted.
Wow, I got to go back.
And
I've never seen it.
How did I marry you?
She's going to have a change of heart. You mentioned The Godfather. Tom Hagen is I guess in legal terms, Tom Hagen in The Godfather is the in-house counsel. Now, do lawyers in law school learn how to do that if they want to be in-house counsel, how to work with the mafia? And is that a thing? Is that a track?
It certainly wasn't taught when I was in law school, except maybe in our ethics courses, which would be really careful. Be really careful if you accept an in-house counsel job, who you're working
if
for.
You're interviewing with Don Corleone, maybe you're getting off on the wrong track. Let's go back to the courtroom. One of my favorite reversals of all time in a courtroom scene is in The Untouchables, which only gets into the courtroom, I think, toward the third act. It's mostly a shoot 'em up with gangsters and the Chicago cops trying to stop him. Kevin Costner, Sean Connery was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. I think he won for that one. But in that courtroom, that's when they're going to try to bring down Capone by looking at his books, and then they show that they enter into evidence the little black book of one of the mafia's lawyers or accountants, and it's everybody that Al Capone has paid off, all the names, and the judge takes a look at it, and then he immediately dismisses the jury. that he now understands has been tainted by the Capone crew and brings in a wholly different jury from another courtroom, like a virgin jury, that will render the decision that puts Capone away. Does that happen like every day, that kind of thing?
Could not happen, folks. Couldn't happen without defense counsel knowing about that. But I'm so sorry, because it is a really cool turn of events. But no, that really could not happen. To make a big leap from the blood and guts of the Untouchables to Miracle on 34th Street, which is, of course, a Christmas classic. We watch it every year, and a lot of that plays out in the courtroom in a fun way. I think what's so fun and ridiculous about it is that it gets into all of the motivations of the different players in court. The two lawyers and the judge whose political consultant is always in the court and approaches the bench to advise the judge on perhaps what he should and shouldn't do. Can I just interject?
Yes.
That's no matter how political our judiciary has been claimed to become, I've never seen that in real life. A political consultant there in the courtroom. It doesn't happen.
You're saying that there are not cigar-chomping, fast-talking political consultants advising our judges. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that. I'm confident of that.
All right.
Quite confident of that. But I think in that movie, the consultant is saying to the judge is supposed to decide whether or not this guy who believes he is Kris Kringle, says he is Kris Kringle, really is Kris Kringle. And all this mail has come into him from children all over the world with their Christmas lists. And I think the cigar-chomping consultant is saying, hey, judge, do you want to be the judge that said there's no Santa Claus?
Yeah.
And maybe that's what influences the judge, but I think just as much as anything else is the bigger story that is really kind of beyond the justice system. And that is, if you believe in Santa Claus, he exists.
It's a beautiful thought. And the judge is quite clever in that one, the way he navigates that with the help of his consultant. What other judges have you liked in some of these movies? Have you related to any of them particularly? You know, there was Morgan Freeman was the thunderous judge, voice of reason in Bonfires of the Vanities. Not a particularly good movie, but his sermon at the end about how crazy our world is pretty darn good. And My Favorite Wife, another black and white movie from the 40s, who presides over the trial of Cary Grant being married to two women. He's confused, he's confuzzled all the time. He's just trying to get through the day like a normal working Joe. Of those two poles, the high priest epitomized by Morgan Freeman, or the average Joe just trying to get through his workaday, what's the most accurate to what a judge's life is like?
I think the workaday is more typical, but I will say, and I think the reason this works in movies, like why would somebody want to watch a judge in a movie when they could just go to their county courthouse and watch the judge? And it's because if the judge is speaking at length, the judge is saying something that's very, very important to that story, to wrap up the theme. And there are all sorts of issues today that are before our courts that are tremendously important. And there are trial judges, mostly very few appellate judges, but trial judges who have lived through this case day in and day out, seen the testimony, and feel it is their job to call out whatever problems are happening. I will tell you, as a former trial judge, in judge school at the North Carolina School of Government, the general rule for trial judges is you don't need to say everything you think. If you're going to give a speech just think about what's it going to look like when you get reversed. Because something you said that was just a feeling you had that really wasn't necessary for the process.
I feel like this is instructional on a domestic front too. I feel like as I think back on our life, I think maybe I've said too much. I think maybe I haven't needed to pontificate and say everything that's on my mind all the time at home. Would you agree?
I concur with that. I concur with that. We can all learn, but it is important, I believe, for judges, trial judges, appellate judges, who have so much authority, and we want the public to have confidence in our justice system, to also be able to identify within the realm of what their duties are. You know, oftentimes there are outcomes in cases that break our hearts, but the law has required them. And it might be that the law has required them for a good reason, but the part that breaks our heart is a bigger societal problem.
Let's stay on that point right there, because heartbreaking puts me in the mind of a movie I know you love, Philadelphia. I don't know about the judge so much in that movie, but you have two really interesting lawyers. We can start talking about lawyers now. You have Denzel Washington is like the streetwise lawyer, and Tom Hanks was at the, what they call it, a blue shoe or a white shoe law firm? I don't know, something like that. I guess
I think it's called White Shoe.
Yeah,
it's called White Shoe, and now that we, post-pandemic, I don't know, it's probably White Sneaker.
Right.
But and in that film, again, it's about a much, much bigger story.
Tom Hanks is HIV positive, and his law firm has dismissed him for bungling a case, supposedly, but Tom Hanks suspects and knows that it was because he's HIV positive.
Well, he was completely set up, and a lawyer who's watching that film can see the details of the film of how he was set up in the old days of word processing, when you didn't have things in the cloud and you could actually hide a document. But Denzel Washington is a solo practitioner. I think I don't know if he has TV ads, but he's a personal injury lawyer, and he sees himself as representing just average folks. And I think he previously had a case with Tom Hanks in which Tom Hanks just wiped the floor with him, or Tom Hanks' firm just totally beat him. And when Tom Hanks comes to see him, he is the last of a long line of lawyers that Tom Hanks has been trying to represent him. And he's not looking good. And this is I can't remember when that film was made, but this was about a time when AIDS was considered to be really like so stigmatized, more stigmatized than any medical condition I can think of. And Denzel Washington himself doesn't really know about it, doesn't know any gay people.
He's not particularly sympathetic to Tom Hanks going in.
He's not sympathetic to him going in. And he's a reflection for a lot of America, a lot of people in the audience. What is this about? He has to go through a learning arc about what Tom Hanks' situation is, and he, at the same time, has to deal with someone who probably he saw as very different from him, white shoe law firm, Ivy League, very different from him. Denzel Washington wins that case in the courtroom against all these highfalutin lawyers, in part with a visual, just like we saw in To Kill a Mockingbird, by having Tom Hanks unbutton his shirt to show lesions that were like the lesions that had been on his face when he got fired.
Yeah.
It's a really dramatic turning point in the film.
After, of course, there's lots of setbacks in the courtroom and things. But you mentioned arc, and movies, really the success of movies hinges so much on the character arc. And actors love to play lawyers because they can have these great arcs. First, you get so many of these movies are David and Goliath stories where the lawyer gets to be David going up against some big mean Goliath like in Civil Action. But then there's also this opportunity for personal growth like you were talking about with Denzel Washington. In A Few Good Men, Tom Cruise gets the case because he is the prosecutor who is known for making easy deals. And so he gets the case because the powers that be want it to become a deal that just goes away, and then he's got to rally all of his Tom Cruise strength. You know, we all know the Tom Cruise strength thing. I don't know if he actually runs real fast in that movie or not, but yeah, Tom Cruise musters all of his Tom Cruise-ness to find the courage to prosecute it and eventually gets the best of Jack Nicholson, which is totally unrealistic. Now, I can say that's not real, that Tom Cruise getting the best of Jack Nicholson at all. But these character arcs are part of what makes these movies so successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then think about Witness for the Prosecution. Witness for the Prosecution, the character arc of a lawyer. Is that Charles Lawton?
Yeah.
Who's this really accomplished lawyer. Barrister.
Yeah.
And a man comes to him in great trouble, and there's a twist at the end. I'm not going to spoil it for you folks, but you got to see this movie.
Yeah.
Because this great barrister who's so smart and so accomplished
Yes.
totally missed something. Kind of like Richard Gere in Primal Fear.
Oh, wow, that's a great one. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Ed Norton.
But yeah, that's one where the smoothie lawyer is really brought low by having been played by somebody. Yeah, that is a great one. One of my favorite lawyers of all the courtroom films is Paul Newman in The Verdict, which he is. It takes the stuffing. I like the ones that take the stuffing out of the lawyers. No offense, but these guys making big speeches, and some of them get to wear black robes and all that. But I like the films where it's like, they're not all super smooth, and they're not all knowing, and they're not all foghorn leghorn. Some of them have a drinking problem and don't know how they're going to make the rent, and get this big case and just about lose it, and until they have to find something inside that they call upon to get the good result. But I love Paul Newman. He's probably my favorite lawyer.
That's a wonderful film, and I will just say as an aside, I'm on the board of Bar Cares, which is a nonprofit entity associated with the North Carolina Bar Association, and we provide free, confidential mental health and substance abuse services for lawyers. As you may have heard me say over the years, there are many, many lawyers who have substance abuse and mental health problems. I do think that having that portrayed in film and in a way it is in The Verdict shows somebody struggling, but somebody who is able to cope with that.
Yeah.
And able to function.
Maybe the most relatable, I don't think she's a lawyer in the movie. I think she's a paralegal, but probably the most relatable to everybody is Erin Brockovich. Hell, but that's a story. She's the paralegal who has the great idea that allows the plaintiff's attorney to win the big case. Is that how it works?
Yeah, the plaintiff's attorney, Ed Masry,
yeah.
Who's, I can't remember who plays him.
Albert Finney.
And, he's almost a foil to Erin Brockovich, like a judge is a foil in some other cases, where she's got this theory, she's got this idea, and he's like, what? Yeah. I don't think so. What?
And people trust her. The plaintiffs that they need trust her more than the lawyer.
Yeah, people do. They do trust her because she's one of them.
Yeah.
She's one of them. She's not wearing a suit.
In a way, every lawyer in a movie, if you're going to play a lawyer, has to overcome distrust. Unless you're like Paul Newman, who wakes up looking all hungover at the beginning of the movie, then kind of everybody can relate to him. But a lot of times in these movies, the lawyer, you have to deal with the fact that they're not the most loved profession, and you have to have a moment where you sort of bring them down to our level so that we can relate to them. Like when John Travolta, who is a pretty well-to-do lawyer, starts to gamble everything and lose in a civil action. Once he's kind of brought down a peg or two, then we can get more invested in him, and he becomes a real hero.
Well, effective lawyers, especially lawyers who argue cases in the trial courts before juries, they know that they're going in with public skepticism about lawyers. And that is job one, to relate to people and to relate to audiences. I think the reason that we like these courtroom dramas as well is for a person who isn't a lawyer, lawyers and judges have so much power over our lives. But to see them struggle, to see them stumble, to see them fail, again, reassures us that they're not as all-powerful as we might think they are.
God, you are so good. Did you prepare that argument at home? Did you script that? Because that was really good. What a closer. Well, I don't know how much time we have left, but we have a little surprise. Lucy discovered a film that's a courtroom drama that's reaching back a ways, but it also has a North Carolina connection. So tell them about our discovery, my dear.
Yes, I can believe this. And, thanks to technology, I could actually screen this film on my computer from 1929. The film is Coquette, and Douglas Fairbanks' wife, Mary Pickford, stars in it. She actually won an Academy Award for her portrayal of this Southern woman who is a doctor's daughter, well-to-do, and she's a big flirt. And she flirts with many, many men, and she leads men on, but she falls in love with a guy from the other side of the tracks. And her father ends up killing this man.
Because he's so against their union.
He's so against it, and it's called Coquette because that's a terrible thing to say about calling a woman a coquette in 1929 was like some other words I'm not going to use on this podcast. But she actually worked with a voice coach to learn a Southern accent.
Well, not just any Southern accent, but the story's based on a real case from
Richmond County,
North Carolina.
Yes, and in Richmond County, there was a trial, and some of our listeners may have read about this trial before. In the movie anyway, I don't have the trial transcript. In the movie, the daughter, in order to try to spare her father's life, lies about what happened between her and this young man.
Sure.
And the father can't let her do it. And then there's gunplay in the courtroom.
Bang. We're ending the podcast on a bang. You'll have to watch Coquette from 1929 to see how it all falls into place. And with that, do we rest our case?
This podcast episode is adjourned.
You've been listening to All Things Judicial, a podcast from the North Carolina Judicial Branch. You can find out more about North Carolina Judicial Branch by visiting nccourts.gov. I'm Roger Winstead with the Judicial Branch Communications Office, and I'm reminding you to keep all things judicial. Thanks for listening. And cut.